It is a concept that has already drawn national attention on the Joy News channel, where prominent personalities who have varied expertise within and beyond the borders of Ghana have been featured to share their experiences, the perspective and solution to solving societal problems. It aims at inspiring the younger generation to whip up patriotism and personal development. I'm talking about the new program DAB, Sages Show on the Joy News channel. But who are the faces behind this concept? Today, we get to engage one of them, Mr. Yao Nsako. Mr. Nsako, good afternoon. Welcome to the Post.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much.
And I must say that it's indeed a pleasure for me to be speaking to you. So the sages, I mean, what really is the motivation behind it, if you can tell us?
Well, there are several parts of it, but let me try and quickly. A group of us who are independent actors, I stress the independent because we don't work to any sort of partisan considerations, but we're all Africans. And I suppose a common denominator is that we all care deeply about development and scholarship in Africa. We grew up very aware of the reverence in our societies and our cultures as Africans for the place of the wise old man and the wise old woman, and the mentoring roles that they used to play in our history, you know, storytelling and so on and so forth. We were brought up to respect the experience of these people and the role that they played. And by making these mentoring and coaching channels and the ability to share their experiences through telling their stories, etc., we were able to orchestrate an intergenerational dialogue in our society. But we felt that what has happened since our strange democracy took place in many parts of Africa is that there's been a lot of shouting and noise pollution, what we call in Ghana the babies with sharp teeth. And that has tended to crowd out the media from the point of view of excellence in engagement, civil and respectful dialogue or conversation, even when people disagree. Our view was that on a Pan-African basis, if we could get symbols of the excellence that we once had in people like the sages to demonstrate that, it will take the society forward. The other thing is that Professor Giovanni Arrighi called it the long 20th century. We are interested in having conversations that are based on credible analysis over the long term. These sorts of near-term conversations lead us not to dig deep into the roots of issues, the structural foundation of problems that we face. I think it was Michel Foucault who spoke about the archaeology of knowledge. It is important to place current events in their historical context.
Right.
And any of the people that we are talking to are people who have lived experience over decades.
Absolutely.
It is an opportunity for them to be able to share some of it with us.
So, I mean, last weekend on was quite revealing, the interview with Professor Akila Pasoya. I'm just looking forward to one of my own chiefs, Professor Nana SKB Asante, the Omanhene of Asokore in the Ashanti region. But when you set out to do this, what qualities were you looking for?
Well, some of the people you have mentioned, we started out with Reverend Professor Gilbert Answer, and then we went to Dr. Nana SKB Asante. And then there was Professor Kofi Asare Opoku. And then we've had the interview with Professor Akila Pasoya,
right,
who you mentioned. And then we've had the interview with Professor Justice Willie Mutunga, the former Chief Justice of Kenya. I think there is an underlying theme that you get. These are all world-class scholars. They are people who are very celebrated in their fields. They are distinguished. They are high achievers. And underlying that, they are all above 70. We started saying that everybody had to be above 70. Because we were now starting, we actually pushed it to above 75 and said we would deal with that first. So if you look at the ages, Reverend Professor Gilbert Answer is 94.
Absolutely,
He has lived through the whole post-colonial experience of Africa, if you decide to count that from 1957. And they are people who got to the very apex of their professions. Nana Dr. S.K.B. Asante is 91. Professor Kofi Asare-Opoku is 91. Professor Akila Kwasoya is 85, and on it goes. And you can tell from the quality of sharing that they did that these are no small people. These are world-class scholars. So they are doing us a favor by showing up. That's the way that we look at it. It's not we doing them some sort of favor or even thinking that we are celebrating them. They are doing us a favor by appearing and sharing these deep wells of knowledge. And when you listen to them, you see that they are able to place things in a context that these days, when you're listening to people talk, is a bit lost.
Right.
They have a very deep understanding of the progression of things, why things were as they are, some of the factors of decay, and there will be more people like that coming on board.
And you, for example, I mean, fits. I mean, in terms of their shoes and sometimes the national values that they espouse, I think that you are also in that category. But in terms of even listening to some of their take on national issues, for example, Professor Akila Kwasoya, former BC of the University of Ghana, his take on the free senior high school program. Now, when we listen to such individuals who lived it all, and we have issues with even governance and the way things are done in this country, what lesson do you think that current generation of leaders we have can draw from the experience of these individuals in terms of shaping the national discourse and national development?
No, first of all, let me correct, I'm not fit to tie the shoelaces of the stages. I don't put myself at all even near them in terms of career. And many of them, actually, they knew me when I was a little boy running around in Legon. So let's first correct that these are people who are exceedingly distinguished, and not just on the African continent. They have distinguished themselves on an intercontinental basis. So it's first important that I underline that and I don't sneak myself into being considered.
Well, perhaps you're warming up to that stage.
These guys are 91, and before I get there, it will take some time. Yeah, but hopefully we will all be around then. Yes, but what are we trying to portray? First is look at the civility in debate. They make their points. They are by nature people, and the people who are to come will follow the same path. They are very outspoken. They are firm and forthright in what they say, but they make their points in very civil and respectful ways. So the culture of invective and insulting that you see on our media, I call them the screaming banshees, the babies with sharp teeth, that when they don't have an argument to make, start to insult people and so on, it's completely absent from the nature of dialogue. They are able to disagree, but they disagree in civil terms, and you listen to them and you respect what they are saying. The other thing that you see about the sages is the complete absence of factionalism. People have asked me every time another one has come, what is the political angle that this person was speaking? I said, I don't know.
Exactly.
And it's not relevant to me. They are looking at the development of society, and that's where they are talking from. And of course, we would like our society to be like that. For me personally, who has had the opportunity to deal with some of them, another thing that I have been really impressed with, not always surprised because some of them are known, is just the sheer humility. In spite of their significant levels of achievement and distinction, they are very humble people. And when you engage with them, they are willing to listen. No matter who you are, you have a point of view. So in my view, and also extremely hardworking. These are people who have pushed themselves to the apex of their professions. They've gone to the very apex on a global basis. They are respected at the global level of excellence. And yet they are very humble. So on many fronts, they represent examples. But it is also worth saying that another objective was that we realized, it came to us very clearly when the late Professor Michere Mugo died. Michere Mugo was a titanic, stalwart figure in East Africa and in many parts of the African diaspora. But when we mentioned Michere Mugo to try and celebrate her in West Africa, many people were asking the question, who's Michere Mugo? It was strange. Meshere Mugo co-authored The Trial of Didan Kimathi with Ngugi wa Thiong'o, and she did much, much, much more.
Right.
Very highly respected. But you can see that there has been a compartmentalization in Africa. If you go to East Africa and you mention Kwame Gyekye, who was one of Africa's lead philosophers.
Right.
Many in East Africa say, who is Kwame Gyekye? If I, in your studio now, if I come and I say, Professor Archie Mafeji, stalwart figure. There are many there who say, who is Archie Mafeji? Claude Eke. And we could go on. Yesterday, I was looking for some information on Professor Abdul Rahman Mohammed Babu, a Zanzibari Tanzanian scholar of tremendous distinction.
Right.
I could find nothing on YouTube, nothing, absolutely nothing in terms of him himself speaking. There was one set of commentaries.
That's sad.
So it is important for us to make sure that at least those who are gone, there's nothing we can do, regrettably. I have said this before, so I might as well say it again. I was actually in conversation with Professor Olan Hontonji from the Beninois philosopher. Big name, but you mention him even in West Africa. Many people say, who was Hontonji? That is a strange thing to hear. We were in conversation. I was actually trying to get him on WhatsApp when sadly he fell ill and passed away.
Right.
One of the reasons why we are doing this is also to ensure, because there's tremendous evidence, not just from the point of view of scholarship, but if you talk to the people in the background that I come from, business, the marketeers, they will tell you that the absorption of media for younger generations is very different from what it used to be. They do a lot of the absorption from electronic and audiovisual means.
Right.
So they go onto social media, they go onto YouTube, and so on and so on. And one is not better than the other. I'm not speaking about it as a regret. But when you go looking for a lot of these sort of prestigious African scholars, some of the names that I mentioned, Archie Mafeji, Ben Magubani, and so on and so forth, Kwame Gyekye has not been gone for so long. You try and look for...
I'll do that.
He was a considerable heavyweight.
Okay.
Edubuahi, as a scholar, not as a politician, you didn't find much on them.
Of course.
In electronic means. So we faced up to the issue. If you have the younger generation shifting their media consumption towards electronic channels, and you have a huge amount of the historic scholarship of Africa only in print, you are heading into a situation where, if you are not careful, a huge amount of what has piled up that we should be looking at in terms of the archaeology of African knowledge or knowledge produced in Africa that will help us to be able to understand the things that are coming may be lost on us completely.
All right.
And just making a small contribution, we can't solve it, but it is something that scholars across Africa, the universities, the academies must think about very carefully.
Absolutely.
Because if I want to understand the history of capitalism in Europe, electronically, I'm able to find material all the way to the 14th century. I see the Medicis, Florence, and so on, the city-states of Italy, it's all over there. But we are talking of people who I knew in my lifetime, and we cannot find the scholarship footprint.
All right. So, I mean, because of time, maybe, so the feedback we've gotten from people, they're asking, I mean, are you going to sustain this? What is the end game? Is it going to be a permanent feature?
Yeah, what we are very clear in our mind that we are not going to prolong it just to prolong, but to the extent that we are able to find people who meet the criteria that has been established for the sages in global Africa. This is not just about Ghana. In global Africa, and you will see from some of the names that are coming soon, that taking a Pan-African approach, we will continue. Whichever is exhausted first will determine when we end the program. But we are deeply grateful, before I go off, for the time, the energy and effort that these sages are putting in. It's a huge amount. They're not paid for doing this, and they are sharing tremendous amount of knowledge in a climate that is sometimes hostile to people being objective. So we are deeply, deeply, deeply grateful to them for doing this.
And I'm also very grateful for speaking to me this afternoon here on the Pulse. Mr. Yaon Sarko is behind the stage.